Car dealership guy is with me today. I'm excited. Thanks for joining me, car dealership guy.
Yes, Chris. Thanks for having me. Really excited about this.
Let's just quickly set the stage. Why did you create this account and what's kind of your intention behind it? A lot of people want to know that, and so do I.
Yeah, it's a question I get a lot. I created that account was created for fun. It was right before the new year. I'm a creative. I like to build. And I saw an opportunity. I've been on Twitter for many years, and I've never really said much. I was sort of just lurking around, absorbing information. And I created that account, started tweeting. I got an early retweet from Strip Mall Guy, a good friend, Real Estate Trent, and it was really the rest is history. I felt the momentum and started just sharing knowledge very randomly, not very didn't think too much through it, and I could just tell instantly that it was like this product market fit spark. Like people were commenting, engaging, retweeting. I mean, it was pretty absurd. I mean, and that account's grown to 30,000 followers in about 100 days. So it's been, quite an adventure just from the connections and networking. And I'll parlay this to the second part of your question, which was, what's my intent with that account? And I get asked this a lot, like, what's my angle? How am I monetizing it? And, the reality is I'm already monetizing it. I've met investors through the account. I've met, people, vendors, potential business partners, so though I haven't sold any, digital products or stuff like that, which I guess would be the more traditional way of monetization. I have been monetizing in really the relationships, which I just would not have ever had the access to this type of network if it wasn't for this account and for the exposure on a platform like Twitter. And so, I don't know what the future holds, if there will be any more kind of direct monetization forms. I did launch this Twitter car buying service, which blew up. This was like my first month on Twitter. And I started helping some people out, but I couldn't even handle the volume without revealing who I am and my company. And so I quickly kind of put that to bed for now. But, time will tell how this evolves. People are always DMing me opportunities. And I'll definitely jump on the right opportunity when the time is right. But it's going to have to be something very compelling and with potential for big scale. So that's how I think about it.
I love it. I sometimes wish I had an anonymous account. I think there's things I would say, maybe good or bad, that I just don't I don't say because I'm not anonymous. But maybe one day you'll see Class B industrial guy pop up out of nowhere. And
I love it. Yeah, a lot of people say that, and the reality is, a lot more people know who I am today. It's still a very, very small percentage as a whole. But you can definitely say a lot more and, just feel comfortable when the majority of the world just doesn't know who you are. And you really feel comfortable sharing your thoughts without having to worry about being canceled or all these other things or, negative implications for your business or stuff like that.
Yeah. It's amazing because when you can't attach an idea or something somebody said to a person, you can actually see things as funny or like get the joke. But when you're in today's world, when you can attach it to someone, you can take something that an anonymous person could say and laugh at it. But if a real person says it, it's like, all right, it's game on. It's just kind of fascinating how the world's kind of, that's the current world we live in. But
yeah, I've had a couple these urges to just go anon to reveal who I am, because I really think that it would clearly be great for my business. I have plenty of people that would love to buy cars from us. But every time it's funny, like random people convince me not to do it. People that I don't know, they'll DM me and they just say, please don't do it. For right or wrong, they're telling me you're a gift to the Twitter community. The knowledge is super helpful and whatnot. So I'm like, and it does convince me when you hear that from random strangers that are finding so much value in the knowledge that I'm sharing. It does compel you not to reveal your real identity and to keep sharing, at least for now.
I love it. All right. Let's kind of dive into this industry. We're going to break it down and try and give folks some lessons learned about the car industry. So I kind of broke it up into segments, kind of what people can think about when they're going to buy a car. Then we're going to talk about like the industry kind of as a whole, and then kind of like where we are today based on, how the world is shaking out right now. So let's just start with, if I'm going to go buy a car, let's call this all the tips and tricks to know when buying a used car. So
Yeah.
let's go.
Sure. Look, I think so. I set up this database. I call it cardealershipguide.org. This was in like the first couple of weeks of launching Twitter, and I've been sharing on a rolling basis all these different common tricks and traps for car buyers. And as a dealer, that I've really seen a lot. I don't want to say all because you never see it all, but I've seen most of it over 15 years. Car buying fundamentally hasn't changed. The process for which you hire a car has, but it's the same tricks, or a lot of the same tricks, a lot of the same pitfalls. And I think that, as consumers nowadays, there's just so much access to information where you can really arm yourself and go buy that car and, and not get screwed. And I think that most dealers are generally have good intent. They're thinking long term. They've had these businesses for decades and they want to continue that. And so, they're going to act accordingly. But there are some bad actors where you have to be careful. And, I think you see it a lot with, vehicle integrity. Last I checked, I connect with our consumer lenders a lot. And I want to say that about 50% of all repossessions in the used car space happen because customers need to have expensive repairs on their vehicle that they can't afford. And we sell used cars, of course, and our percentages are way below that. And I attribute it to the fact that we just we really invest a lot into our vehicles, and we bring them up to a very high standard. And so I think that a lot of these common pitfalls and traps that the average consumer falls into can be avoided simply by just doing business with a reputable dealer. Period. Because there will always be ways for the dealer, if they really want to make an extra buck at the expense of your car or you. That's just how it works. I mean, we have, we refurbish the product, we have the lending relationships. I mean, there's a lot of power on the dealer side, although that is diminishing with transparency. But I think that I always tell people, like, you can read through my common pitfall section on cardealershipguide.org and you'll learn a lot, such as never take the car for a test drive when it's already warm, start it on cold. Check the tires, check the inner tire wells, that the used car dealer didn't just flip some tires and, maybe your tires are rotted in the inside and now they're saving $400 or $500 in replacing tires. Or, I mean, I could go on and on and on. There's endless amounts of tricks. The reality is, if you do business with a reputable retailer, that's your best chance of truly getting a great vehicle and not getting screwed.
Is there a way to know if somebody's reputable, or is it just kind of asking around, or is there like a, online directory that you can go check people out or get a score on them?
Google reviews, they do get gamed sometimes by some dealers, and a lot of dealers don't. I mean, most dealers that I know will never touch that. It's not, it's very legal, or there's some laws around it, whatever. But I just think even from an ethical perspective, most dealers really pride themselves, the good ones, on getting great reviews. Old school way of just, referrals and leveraging people like myself through my platform, asking around, people, hey, kind of tell me a little bit about your experience here. So, it never gets old. I've had this thesis for I call it like a Yelp for supply chains. As a dealer, I know that one thing that I always find myself, a way that we add value is we tell our customers about our entire refurbishing process. And, how much money we spend in these cars and invest in them to bring them up to a great standard. And I feel like the consumer doesn't see that. They don't know that, because Yelp or Google reviews only shows you the facade, right? The car purchase and how the customer felt at that moment or 30 days later. But what actually happened before that, right? Like, where did the dealer buy the car? What was the condition of the car when they purchased it? What type of standards did they refurbish the vehicle at? And so I felt like I've had this thesis, like we need some internal eyes into these businesses to really know. Now, two other sources, which I'll drop here, are there is a platform called YAA. It's run by a guy named Zach Shefska, and it's an endeavor where he's aiming to do what you just said, really crowdsourcing a bunch of reviews and trying to, help consumers understand where to go. And there was also a product on the market which I became familiar with called SureSale. And what they attempted to do is they attempted to standardize the quality across all dealers. Now that didn't quite work for them, and so I don't know exactly what's happening there. I just heard that there's some issues. And I'm going to assume it's because cars have been in such high demand, so you almost haven't needed that. But the point is, there have been attempts to solve this challenge, which you're mentioning, which is how do we know who are the best dealers?
Yep. Okay. So I show up on site, and I think one of the things I always think about is when I show up on site to buy a car, how do I know if I should buy one versus lease one? Like, I've had so many people say you should lease, and then the next guy that's a genius comes in and goes, no, you should buy. Is there like a good answer, or is it depends?
So I have this Naval-esque fortune cookie tweet that I use. It's like it's my heuristic, which is you should lease if you're optimizing for lifestyle. You should buy if you're optimizing for value.
Okay.
Now, in the last year, that's been a little funky, so it's not perfect. But I think all in all, when you lease, you're driving a brand new car. You have the majority of your service covered, for the foreseeable future. But you don't retain any equity unless you buy out the car, and then you have some residual value. When you buy, arguably it's a better deal long term because you retain more equity, but you're paying a higher monthly payment for a car that is not as new. And so it really is circumstantial. I think in the last year, the challenge we've had is the third option, which is customers have come to us for cars that are, let's say from $30,000 to $50,000, and they say, and we offer them the car, but the reality is, you look at what these cars are going for new MSRP, and it's almost the same, or maybe even less expensive at some points. And so it's been very challenging for us as used car retailers, because the used cars they've gone up over 40% in price in 1 year. I mean, how can when a used car eclipses the same exact new car, the comparable version of that car isn't new. I mean, it's just, you can't compete. You tell the customer, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Go buy a new. Now, MSRP prices are increasing right now. So, and used cars are entering a normal depreciation cycle again, or it seems like it. But it's definitely been a very challenging year from that perspective, when it comes to kind of the used versus new dichotomy.
And they're up 40%. And is a lot of this inflation? Did all the cars get bought? Like, where did all the cars go? Because when you drive around a lot of places, they just don't exist right now. Did everybody just buy cars, or why did we see a 40% spike besides people got a lot of free money and didn't have anything else to do besides buy cars? Or maybe that's the answer.
Yeah. I mean, that was definitely a driver. We had this, we like to say we had like just tax season for like 6 months last year. Tax season is the season where everyone gets their tax refunds and buys cars. Traditionally, I mean, it's typically around March, late February, March, maybe even early April this year. But it's a function of many things. I mean, you have the chip shortages on the new car side, which now you took out all these new cars from the supply, and people flocked to used cars because they had no other options. I mean, unless you want to wait 6 months to buy a new car. And so you had that. You had all the rental car companies that dumped all these cars in the peak of COVID. And suddenly COVID's over, there's a travel boom, and they all need cars. So they're driving prices up. I mean, for the first time ever in my entire career, I see rental car companies buying used cars at auction. That's like unprecedented as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
And so you had all these factors at once. Of course, there's so much money in the system, and altogether it just drove used car prices up significantly higher. And I had another tweet in early January. This was again my first couple of weeks on tweeting on Twitter, and I pretty much said, like, I predict that that's it. This is the peak. And car prices were still very strong at that point, but I could sense that, again, very anecdotal. I'm not an economist. Like, I just see what's happening in the ground floor. I have teams that are buying cars, and we chat, we talk. What are we seeing? It's very anecdotal, but we could tell. I mean, the majority of the predictions I've made publicly on Twitter have come to fruition, because I'm not some guru. I'm just seeing what's happening on the front line.
Yeah.
And so the market is adjusting right now, and I feel like we're entering a normal depreciation cycle again.
what's a depreciation cycle? Just prices going down?
Yeah. So basically, in 2021, prices of used cars just kept going up. So the longer you held a car, the more profit you made on that car because it had appreciated, which was unprecedented. I mean, there's no words to describe it. It made zero sense. As a dealer, you did not have an incentive to even sell the car because it kept going up in value. But the depreciation cycle for our cars, used cars every year, they have some normal, rate of depreciation. And that just, we haven't seen that since some point in 2020 and definitely not in 2021. And now in 2022, we just finally had our two consecutive months of wholesale prices dropping according to the Manheim index of inventory or Manheim used car index, which is just a way to track wholesale used car prices. And so we have seen two consecutive months of wholesale prices falling, which is a good signal because it may show that demand is cooling. And though there isn't more inventory in the system and new cars are still very much in short supply, it does seem like demand is starting to cool. And we're entering this normal rate of depreciation, like how used cars used to always be.
And I think you just answered the question, but none of that has to do with new cars kind of ramping back up and there being more supply of new cars, so used cars are starting to dip. That's not the reason.
Yeah, I think there are some segments in the market where new cars are there's some more supply, and some dealers are stabilizing. But another thing I recently read and I tweeted about this as well was Hyundai, Kia, their new car sales are down double digits, percentage wise year over year. I mean, I think 20 to 30%. So there's real issues. The war in Ukraine is not helping. There's a bunch of components or different resources that come from there. I mean, everything's so connected. So the short answer is no. In an aggregate, new car supply is still not nearly where it should be, or increasing at the rate that to balance out the supply demand issue. But again, I think this is what's going to continue buoying the used car prices, relatively speaking. Although really the biggest impact that it's making is the fact on the used car side, where you see the used cars under $20,000 right about just not moving at all. I mean, they're staying very stable, and you just cannot touch those cars. They're completely, the prices that you have to pay for them, it's just completely out of market at this point.
And when you said earlier lifestyle versus value, is that in the eye of the beholder, or is there price points where you say this is for a value buyer, this is a lifestyle, or maybe for somebody lifestyle is a Lamborghini, but for others lifestyle is a Ford Escape? Or did you mean more behind that statement?
No, I'm not a leasing expert, so I always tell people like, hey, don't I'm not your guy to chat too much about leasing. Otherwise, I am your guy. But I think that no, it just really comes down to do you want to drive a brand new car, have all this service and protections, and not have to worry about almost anything, or do you want to have more equity when it's all said and done in your car?
Yeah,
and that's kind of the trade off there for most consumers. And I think we're getting back into that type of cycle, or we're going to be getting into that cycle soon, as new cars over time start to come back into equilibrium.
So if you bought a car, let's say peak of the market, you finance the hell out of it, and now you're going to come back and sell it in a few years, like the typical cycle. I mean, I'm not asking you to be a finance guru, and maybe the answer is self-explanatory, but like, what are all these people going to do that have loans that are worth way more than the car's value, call it a couple years from now?
Well, I think that's always how the car business has been. Cars have always depreciated. And unless you can convince me that there's going to be a very rapid deflation in the economy, then I just don't see used cars starting to plummet in pricing. Yeah. I think that the baseline there's a new baseline in the market, yeah. And if beforehand it was X, now it's X plus Y, and we're just gonna have to get adjusted to that. And so I think we're gonna, at least what it seems like thus far, which could change any day. It's just used cars are starting to kind of drop at a normal pace in the value or in price. And I had one more thing there, which I'm blanking on right now. But yeah, I mean, time will tell. How. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention is that I also wrote about this, which is that for anyone that purchased a car at call it peak of the price hike, say end of last year when cars were just really at their peak from a value perspective, I did recommend. I said you should buy gap insurance, which is guaranteed asset protection. It just means that if you get your car gets totaled or something happens to it, insurance will not pay off what you owe in that car. Insurance will pay off what the car is worth. And so if we do enter some rapid deflation, like what you just alluded to, then I think that's a very smart investment to make, because people are going to find themselves in a situation like that. You could have your average Joe that makes $50,000 a year suddenly $10,000-$20,000 upside down in their car, where they owe a lot more than it's worth, and that doesn't go away. You have to pay that money.
Yep.
And so there's these little nuances in the market that it's important to keep an eye out for, depending on how this economy continues shifting.
Well, just real quick, when you've talked about 2 months of dropping on a percentage basis, like what are we talking here? 2%, 10%, 20%? Where are we?
Yep. So I want to say the exact number is 3.6%. Now, yes, we went up 40+% and we're down 3.6%. We all know that. But that's not the important part. The important part is that it's 2 consecutive months of us going down. That's the important part, because that hasn't happened since, call it, summer of last year. And even in the summer of last year, it was very temporary. And then boom, in the third month, it went back up. And so I think that it may, I think this time is different. I could be wrong. It could go up again, but I don't see it continuing to go up for another 8 months after this, right? Just like all these other industries that we're seeing being impacted right now, I think that we're now entering the part in the cycle where even if it goes up a little bit in April, as more people get tax refunds and more people buy cars, it's going to continue going down after that. That's my prediction.
We'll call it Putin's price plummet.
Oh yeah, Putin's price plummet, right? You saw someone write about that every month, the different reason for inflation.
Yeah.
Did you see that one?
The one that the clown gets it's like a regular guy, then a clown with a nose, then a clown, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're going to finance a used car, do you just go to the dealer and say, what do you have to offer is by way of financing, or should you not get financing from the dealer and get it from someone else? Is there a trick there?
Financing from the dealer can be very lucrative for the customer as well. And I'll explain both sides. I think on one hand, dealers, when you finance a car, and I'll give you one example. If you have a trade-in, right?
Mm-hmm.
The dealer can actually get a better rate on your loan because you're trading in a car to them at the same time as financing. And the reason is because as a lender, think about it. If I'm giving up my vehicle and I'm buying a new one, then I'm a less risky customer, because I'm more inclined to pay this vehicle off even if I run into hard times, because it's my only car, right? So there's all these things that you learn about how lenders think and how they work. I think that from a financing perspective, your best bet with the dealers, or some ways where you can really get a better deal, are if you're trading in a car or whatnot. And it still doesn't mean you're going to get a better deal, but there are ways to get better deals from a dealer from when you're financing from a dealer. Yeah. On the flip side of that, I always recommend to consumers, which again is completely against my interest because I sell cars, but I always recommend to actually go to your credit union. Credit unions offer great rates. They give you a certified check where you can go and buy the car with predetermined interest rate, and typically you're going to get a better interest rate that way. And so it really depends on and by the way, you can do both. You can bring the check from the credit union, and then you can go to the dealer and say, talk to me, what can you get me, what's my rate going to be? So that's really, you're really turning over all the stones, and in a way you're squeezing the dealer's margin.
Yep. Okay. I've got my financing in place. Warranties. You hear that they're great. You hear don't ever get them. You hear get this one, don't get that one. How do we think about warranties?
Yeah, look, warranties, being from the used car business, I think they're extremely important.
Yep.
So for starters, to talk to you about from the dealer's perspective, it's the highest margin item that you're selling with a car. So anywhere between 40 to 60%, again, depending on the dealer, depending on many aspects on the car. But a warranty typically is a very high margin item. And as dealers, there's some dealers in the market that the way they make their money is only from the warranties. They don't make any money on the car. Which again, it's how certain people work, for better or worse, but that's how they make all their money. But the warranty is something that I recommend simply because I see how much we pay out every month in claims, and it's just like any insurance product. It's if you never used it, it was a waste. Yeah, great. But if you do use it, you can potentially do a claim for $5, 10, $15,000. Hopefully, you don't need to do that because probably you're replacing an engine at that point. But the point is, you are covered with a good warranty company. And so the key is again, going back to what I said earlier about choosing your dealer accordingly, we could have a talk here all day about what's a good warranty, right? Because if you come to me, I'm most likely selling you a warranty that is from a third party, or maybe it's administered by a third party, right? So the key is you need to, if you're going to buy a warranty, it should be a good warranty. How do you know what's a good warranty? Well, again, your best bet is to go to a reputable retailer where you can trust, that comes well recommended, and more likely than not, they're going to have a reputable warranty. The second thing to note is, as a dealer, let's say for a second, hypothetically, I'm paying as a dealer $1,000 for that warranty, and then you're paying $2,000 for it, right? $1,000 markup on that, right? So total cost to you is $2,000, and I paid $1,000. If I am reinsured, which we can get into this as well,
we're going to.
DP went.
We're talking about offshore. We're getting there.
So you want me to save this one for later?
No, let's just go.
All right. So this is the sweet spot about the industry, and I can tell you, Chris, like I learned this. When I was first proposed this, I was much younger, and I was already in a position of management. And I went to ownership, and I said, like, why don't we do this? I mean, it looks like incredible, and ownership is skeptical, rightfully so. But what reinsurance is, it's a pretty incredible way for dealers to, just make more money.
Yep.
And the way it works essentially, you're just setting up a captive insurance company, which just means you have an insurance subsidiary from your company. So if if I'm a dealer, well, I set up a subsidiary, which is an insurance company, and I happen to own it all, right? And what happens there is, going back to my example where you as a customer pay $2,000 for the warranty. I pay my cost that I pay to a third party is $1,000. Well, guess what happens when I'm reinsured? From that $1,000, let's just say $200 is stripped out to an administrator. And the administrator is just someone that picks up the phone and does all the legwork when a customer has a claim. I don't want to deal with that. That's a headache. I don't have time for that. Plus, it's processes. It's a nationwide network of repair facilities and whatnot. So, anyways, I pay $200 to this administrator, but then the $800 that's remaining that I paid out as a cost actually goes back to me. Now, I don't fully earn out that $800 because that's the premium that basically it's the premium that you paid for that warranty. So, in simple terms, over the years, over months, as the warranty pays out, and ultimately the warranty completely earns out, maybe 3-5 years, whatever was not used as claims by you, I keep as profit. And so I have this offshore account, right, where it starts building up all this profit. Now, why is the account offshore? Well, it's offshore because I don't need to pay taxes on it annually on the income and gain from the earned premium. And so basically, I'm accruing this money in this stockpile offshore in the Turks. And the second and ultimately when I want to use this money, I don't even have to take a dividend. All I can do is borrow against it. And you have to pay some interest and whatnot, but that's not the point. Is it's a very sweet way as a dealer to really continue vertically integrating and ultimately retain more of that profit and premium from these warranties. And if you sell a quality car, Chris, this is very lucrative. If you're selling junk, you never want to do this because you're going to end up paying more than you're going to end up paying in claims more than you earn, and you're going to lose money. But if you're selling a quality car, then it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Is there like a percentage of how many people actually use their warranty when they buy it?
It really varies dealer to dealer. I think some of the best dealers I know are like 30%, which is that's incredible for an insurance company. And then some of the ones with higher claims are in the 80s, 90s. So if you think about it, they're really making 5-10% spread there. It really depends. We've been we've been very middle of the road, say 50%, some months less, some months more. But it really varies, and it just depends on the quality of car.
Yeah. Okay, so the $1,000 goes to actually buy the insurance policy. $200 goes to the admin that's going to work on the policy. And remind me one more time, how could any of that 800 that you keep, you would have to spend? What would you be spending that on if the $1,000 policy is already covering any damage?
So the $800, the 800, remember the $1,000 the customer paid markup was your profit, right? But then the $800 is what's left in the account
Oh,
for future claims, right? And so as the customer does not have claims, or maybe they have one claim, whatever it may be, over time you earn out that premium.
got it.
And so another interesting stat that I recently tweeted about was the fact that the average claim that we're seeing nowadays is around $1,000. And so if you're a customer and you pay $2,000 for this, your average claim is $1,000. And again, that's average. So clearly there's higher and lower. You know, to me, it's a no brainer because you're buying a used car. If you're going to keep this thing 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to have more likely than not multiple claims eventually on it. And so it's a good proposition for customers. But just like any, I just bought a new iPhone, right? I bought Apple Care. And it's like my fourth time buying Apple Care, and I've never had a claim ever. But I feel good about it. I sleep good at night. And I don't really give a shit about my phone because if someone steals it, it's on iCloud and I have Apple Care. So Apple's made on me over $1,000 over the last couple of years, but I still feel good about it. And I do know that if I do lose this $1,500 piece of hardware, I know that I can get it back for like $100.
I've never bought Apple Care. Now you're making me think I need to get off this show and go buy some Apple Care.
Like I used to be like that. I was like, oh, I don't buy insurance. I'm an entrepreneur that loves risk. And then over time, I'm like, I don't feel like calling Apple and giving them a sob story about how I'm poor and I need them to help me for free and all this stuff. And so I'm like, let's settle for Apple Care. It's more peace of mind.
I love it. All right, so I know how to finance it. I've kind of figured out a warranty, and this is a Twitter question, but it was, what are like 3 red flags, or what are 3 red flags that you might see at a dealership, or when you're starting to get into the negotiating process, something that everybody that shows up at a car lot should be thinking right as they get there?
I think in today's age, I just go to the fundamentals, right? Like I do have a resource that I put out for free, which is how I talk about what the best way to buy a car and negotiate. Many people have used my playbook, and they say that it's really worked very well for them, which is a great thing, I think. But I think it comes to the core is a lack of transparency across the board. I think is just a red flag with dealers because we're simply in an age. I'll just give you like a quick stat. If you look from 2021 to 2020, the percentage of customers that called to inquire about the price of a vehicle has gone down about like 25% or 20 to 25%. This was from a study, I want to say, by a company called Digital Airstrike. It's a vendor in the industry. And the reason I bring this stat up, which I've had fresh in my mind, I discussed it earlier this week, is because the industry sort of had this shock and woke up after COVID that we need to be more transparent. Right now, I've been a believer in this for a long time, and we've offered, I'd like to say that we're on the forefront of that, but the majority of the industry, has been slow to adapt. That's just a fact, which is why Carvana has been able to scale so quickly, or one reason at least for that. We can get into that later. But the point I'm trying to make here is, without digressing, is that people have higher expectations for more transparency. And the days of you having to really figure out what's the real price of this car from going online, or various other things, those are behind us. People are not putting up with that anymore. And guess what? If you as a dealer make a customer put up with that, they're going somewhere else, because the dealer down the street is most likely not putting up with that anymore either. And it's not just Carvana, right? And so I think that if you're sensing a lack of transparency from the dealer, whether it's price of the car, whether it's price of the add-ons, whatever it may be, price of an extended warranty, even the entire process, right? Are they trying to get me to come into the store before they give me terms and prices? Like, these are very old school tactics that are just not how you're going to win customers and be here in another 5, 10, 15 years. No one wants to put up with that. And so I think the number one thing I say is look for transparency. And if you see that with a dealer, It's again, all studies in the industry point to the more transparent you are, that actually the more profitable you are, because customers are just more inclined to spend with you because they trust you. And so, I would venture to guess that it's very similar in most other industries. But it's definitely, a big thing we're seeing in our industry, and I'm happy about it. I think it's just better for dealers long term, even if it hurts in the short term, and it's definitely better for consumers.
All right. And I know in the recent years, maybe there wasn't much negotiating when you're buying a car. It was kind of like, here's the price, take it or leave it. But in a normal time, maybe we can frame this as a car salesman. They know what they can sell a car for, but they don't ever start there. So I kind of want to have a two-prong approach here. We'll start with how to negotiate a car in normal times, assuming it's not just take it or leave it. And then, if you will share, I want to know how a car salesman is actually paid. Like, what incentivizes them, and why are they willing to move on price? And do they really care at the end of the day what it sells for, as long as they hit a certain number?
Oh, that's a good one. So, incentives, it's everything, right? And I'll start by just saying that on the salesman side, it's good for people to know that more likely than not, this is not perfect, but more likely than not, if you're shopping at a used car store, that salesperson is incentivized per unit on a flat and maybe some commission added or bonus, but primarily they're incentivized to push the unit, sell the car, right? Even if it means getting you a discount, they're still getting that commission check. In a new car store, more likely than not, they're mostly incentivized on commission. And so they want to, maximize the gross profit on that car. And maybe they also have a unit bonus attached to that. And then in corporate stores, they have some chunk of, in corporate stores, you can assume like, again, I don't want to name specifics because I don't know the pay plans of, call it Drive Time or Sonic Echo Park or Car Lots. But many of the corporate stores have salaries plus a group bonus attached to it, right? So you know that if you're going to a corporate store, there's a high likelihood that they are just paid a salary and they just have some volume bonus attached to it at the end of the month. So, anyways, to prime us, that's kind of the three types of salespeople, right? The used car salesperson that's paid a flat, the new car salesperson that's paid commission, and the corporate salesperson that's paid salary plus, maybe some bonus. Okay. Now, remember, if you start with a used car store, right? This salesperson wants to push out the car. They want to sell a unit, right? They may, depending on the salesperson, their integrity, and depending on management, they may work the manager for your benefit, right? So I want to push the sale, whereas my manager, who's clearly making some commission percentage, wants to maximize gross profit. So me as the salesperson, I may work my manager in an edgy situation to discount the car or something just to get you the deal. So there, our incentives are aligned where I'm trying to sell the unit and I don't care about gross profit, or to a certain extent, right? In a new car store, again, it's different because I am paid on commission. More likely than not, I'm going to try to, I'm going to be more aligned with my manager and try to maximize the profit there, right? So to prime us there, it is really important to know, our incentives align or not, because depending on the type of structure or the company, there's simply going to be, you're going to be working with a different type of dynamic with that salesperson. So that's that. Let me flip over to how to actually get the best deal at a store. Right? It's really not complicated. I think it means going back to the basics. And I put out a playbook on this on cardealershipguide.org where I called it how to get a great deal at a car dealership without getting lucky. So, I ripped off the Val, how to get rich without getting lucky type of theme. But this really took off. I mean, this has really gone all over the internet. It's the number one viewed a page on the cardealershipguide.org. And it basically takes you through four major steps, right? And I'll start at a high level, which the four steps are just number one, you have to start online. Research the car you want. Don't go into the dealership and assume that you're going to know what needs to be done or what you want. That's a mistake. So number one, start online. Number two, you got to get smart. And so there's a ton of online tools, which I'll talk about, which you can leverage in order to get smart and to come in armed with as much knowledge as possible. Right. Number three, you build up your negotiating leverage. And I'll talk about this and how you can get creative when you do this. And number four, you make the offer. And so this is the fun part. And there's certain ways to make the offer in order to be as successful as possible. So I'm happy, Chris, I'm happy to jump in and I can give you an overview on each step. And if people would like, they can, of course, go to the resource and they can go into all the further details as well. So like I mentioned, the first step is you want to start online. You want to research the car you want, right? So you really want to leverage a lot of the third party listing sites, the vehicle price aggregation websites. So Car Gurus, TrueCar, Edmunds. I mean, all these, these will all give you a great pulse on the market and also will help you find what do I really want. Now, the good part about this is that dealers are no different than, the high school boy or girl at the teen dance. They have FOMO big time. And what that means is that dealers want to be on every listing site because they're scared that if they're not going to sell the car. And so this will give you a very good pulse of the market on what's available, what are rough price ranges and whatnot, right? And so it's really important, and this gets in this research stage that you also take in consideration your trade-in. Your trade-in is a big moneymaker for dealers. We want your trade. We don't need to pay an auction or a fleet some fee in order to get another car that we can potentially sell. And so your trade-in is very important. You need to research that as well. And again, start by researching the market. Go on websites, some online retailer. There's plenty of websites such as CarMax or various others where you can get a real offer online of how much they'll buy your car for. So start doing your homework and understanding what's your trade-in worth and what car do you really want. That's the first step in the process to getting the best deal. So that was the research, and I kind of commingled that with the second step, which is get smart. But I'll just elaborate a little bit more on the get smart stage, which is that you don't want to discount anecdotal insight as well, right? Calling your local friend who's a car dealer, leveraging book values as well. So we spoke about market pricing, Car Gurus. We spoke about national market pricing, such as CarMax or Carvana. Well, you also want to look at retail book values, which really just means Kelley Blue Book, right? So Kelley Blue Book is typically lags the market, and so it's not the most accurate, but it is still another good data point for you to consider, along with just anecdotes from a local car dealer if you happen to know someone, or tweeting at me, Car Dealership Guy on Twitter. And so when you combine all these data points, now you have a sense of what that car is worth. Again, compare this to the real estate industry, right? You look at comps. What did Joe Schmo pay for that car for that house down the street? Whatever it may be, you start to build. And again, I'm talking about residential real estate. Obviously, not what you do. You guys are in a whole different field, but you start to build an idea of what it's worth. So step number 3 here is you need to build up your negotiating leverage, and this is very, very important because if you know how to navigate through the dealership from a leverage perspective, here's where you can really get the difference of getting a good deal or a bad deal, right? So there's several different points here to keep in mind, but I'll kind of go one by one. Number one, product quality. Does the car have a blemish on the Carfax, right? This will simply mean that the dealer may want to sell the car faster and not hold on to it. Does the dealer carry multiple types of this car? Redundancy, right? Dealers don't need to carry, too many of one car. And if you just locate it proportional to their inventory, or do they have 10 of one car, which they would like to move? The third one I call double dip. Do you have a sweet trade-in that the dealer can retail, right? They're going to be more inclined to give you a better deal so that they can also retail your trade. The fourth one is speed. Can you make the purchase in the next 24 hours? Dealers want to move metal. They're going to want to sell that car. Fifth one is relationship. Do you know someone that works in management? And I say management because, if it's below management, it probably won't help you from a negotiating perspective. But, if you do know someone in management, yeah, they may help you out a bit when you're trying to buy that car. Or they may not, in which case it doesn't help. Number 6 is spiff, which really just means, is it the end of the month? Is it the end of the quarter? Franchise dealers will typically get spiffs from the OEMs. Again, like a kickback or call it a rebate, whatever you want to call it, but they'll typically get something from the OEM for hitting volume targets. And so they're going to want to move that car, especially at the end of the month or the end of the quarter. And the last part here, and I always love to talk about this, is BATNA, right? Best alternative to a negotiated agreement. In the fancy MBA term, which I don't have an MBA, but I've learned this through business. But basically, is there another car in the local market that is similarly priced and comparable to the one you're looking at, right? If there is, great. Leverage that because you'll probably be able to get a good deal because the dealer knows if you're leaving, you're going to buy that car. In 2021, that was a bit tough. And it's also not going to work if you're looking at a very unique Supra or some car that's rare, and there's just not going to be a lot like it in your local market. But if you're buying a Nissan Altima, if you're buying a Toyota Camry, there's going to be a lot of them in the market. Find a very similar car that's comparable. Ideally find it at someone who's a big competitor to the dealer that you're with. So you add some more spice to the negotiation and they really get pissed off because they don't want to give that business to their number one competitor, and leverage that. Because at that point, the dealer is not going to want to lose your business, especially for a car that they can replace. After you've done all of this, you're finally ready to make the offer, Chris. And this is the last part. And so I always say, like, the cardinal rule, if you want to get the best deal, is make an all-in offer. Don't come in and start going piecemeal, because they'll end up getting you on add-ons, on fees, on anything, right? You need to come in with an all-in offer that's, somewhat below what the dealer is asking. And again, every car is different, depending on the add-ons you're getting. There isn't like a perfect percentage, but maybe come in 5% lower, 10% lower, give an all-in offer that's a bit lower, and let the dealer really fight to get your deal done. Because when you give an all-in offer, you're doing two things. Number one is you're creating a forcing function for the dealer. Now they have to figure out how to discount your deal, whether they do that by reducing some fee or the margin on the warranty or the car. Who knows what they do? But that's their job. Let them figure it out. Number two, optics are real in a dealership setting. There's optics, there's politics. And so, you just don't know how the GM or the sales manager, how they're incentivized. And maybe they prefer to reduce some fee, or, maybe they prefer to reduce the price of the car as opposed to the margin on the added products, whatever it may be. So by giving an all-in offer, you're really creating a forcing function where you're allowing the dealer to, set up their path to success with the deal and ultimately get you the best deal. And if you follow this playbook, you're going to get a great deal.
I love it. Where do most car dealers or used car dealers get their cars? From trade-ins or auction lanes, or where do they come from?
Yeah, so several years ago, I think that and I'll lead up to today. You had a just really phenomenon where CarMax was the leader in what we call buy from public, or buying cars from consumers. And I want to say they had somewhere, over 50% of their cars were bought from public, whereas most dealers, bought from fleets, auctions, and, used cars maybe were not as big of a deal for them. Today, it's very, very different. So buying cars from the public is the number one hottest thing in our industry today. And it's for a very good reason. You can't get used cars at great prices. That's the first reason. The second reason is because you want to get a selection that you just can't get at the auction, right? Where can I get the 10-year-old Toyota Corolla with 30,000 miles? I sure as hell can't get that at the auction. And if I do, I may find one of them.
Wait, why can't you get it at the auction?
Because great question. There's just no mass supply from it.
Okay.
If you think about it, the constant source of inventory is from off-lease vehicles, used inventory, that is. And that's coming to you every 2 to 3 years, right? But there's no constant source of cars that are older. And that's why it's harder to get them, because you really have to get them from the public or from trade-ins. And so nowadays, most dealers will get their cars from, or traditional dealers will get their cars from roughly, there's some split, which is very different for every dealer, but from the public, from trade-ins, and from auctions or fleets or other sources like that. Now, you have players in the market like Carvana, CarMax, and other big national or regional players that have just spent tons of marketing on educating consumers to sell them their car. And the percentage of cars that they buy from public, and whether retail or even wholesale, is even higher than 50%. And so it's gotten very aggressive and competitive in the last couple of years, because dealers simply realize that it's just a lot more profitable to buy cars directly from consumers. You're cutting out the middleman, the middlewoman, whatever, and you're making more money. And I can tell you that on our end, we've seen that when we trade in a car and retail it, we typically make somewhere between an additional $400 to $650 in profit, $400 to $650 in profit per car, as opposed to buying the same car if we were able to from, call it an auction or from a fleet or wherever it may be. And so it's more profitable. It's better for me as a dealer as well, because I have more unique inventory to sell that I otherwise wouldn't be able to get at auctions. And so that's definitely been the up and coming trend in our industry.
Okay, real quick, how does an auction work? Like, where do all the cars come from that go to auction? What's the dealer trying to achieve while they're there? You know, I've seen videos. I've got friends in the business. They're standing in the lane. They always have their lane that they stand in. Like, give us like the 5-minute primer on how an auction actually works and who's doing what.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we used to be lane people as well. Those were fun days, but that's far from over now. And really, the people that still go to the lane today, it's really just for novelty, or to kind of see some buddies, shake some hands. If you really want to generate as much value and get great deals or find the best cars, you got to do it online. It's online, online, online. That's where that's the only way to really succeed nowadays at scale. But there's still many dealers that like to go to the auctions. It's great. I loved it at early in my career. I very quickly started hating it when I felt like I could be doing more. And I was never the biggest car guy either, so it was an easy transition for me to go online and start looking for inventory that way. Anyways, going back to your question. So how do auctions work? Right. So these auctions are, you could, I like upload pictures of these on Twitter a lot and sometimes some videos, but, really it's the source of these cars. It really depends on the auction, because, you have conglomerates like Manheim Auto Auctions, which is the biggest auction house, used car auction house in the world. And they get most of their inventory from OEMs, right? So specifically off lease vehicles, fleets, rental car companies. That's where they get their cars. Now, the reason it's so hard to disrupt a 5,000-pound gorilla like Manheim is because they have these really well entrenched relationships, and relationships with these OEMs that they're very loyal to them. I'm sure there's great economics between the relationship, and it's just hard to get them to go to different sources. Now, will that last for many years to come? I don't know, but today that's the number one source of cars for call it the Manheims of the world or the biggest auction houses. On the other hand, you have upstarts like ACV Auctions, and ACV Auctions is a startup, or was a startup. Now it's a publicly traded company. But what they did is they provided a digital app to buy a car for dealers, in real time auctions right on your phone. They come out to your dealership, they do all the inspection on site, all the pictures and whatnot, and they upload it right to the platform. And the market that they've really cornered has been the dealer market. And so they're capitalizing on dealer trade-ins. And so, from my understanding and having looked at data recently, these ACV auctions, or these startups, Backlot Cars, which now is owned by another industry player, they've really capitalized on dealer trade-ins. And so that's the part of the market that they're dominating, whereas the Manheims of the world, the Odessas, another big auction house are dominating, call it the fleets, the OEMs, the off lease.
I love it. Okay. And when you said buying online, I'm assuming this is like a CarMax Carvana discussion. When you say I didn't want to go any longer to the auctions, I wanted to buy online. What do you mean by that?
So I think at a certain point, when you scale and you want, you're tailoring your inventory very specifically for your customer base. You can't find, or you can't possibly be efficient if you're not buying online. And so that was a gradual change, over the years, are buying cars online, and it's all wholesale channels, Chris. So it's not Carvana or CarMax. That's obviously retail, but there's specific, online auctions for dealers. So these are wholesale channels, where, our buying team will go on, several times per week, buy the cars we need. There's a bunch of different tools that, help us along the way. But that's how we do all of our buying today from auctions specifically. We take trade-ins and we buy from many, many different sources. But it's all done online. And, I don't remember the last time we had a buyer at a physical auction at this point.
When you're talking about new car dealers, I understand not anybody can just wake up and say, I'm going to be a new car dealer. They have to have, done a lot within the industry for, let's call it Ford to grant them a dealership. But are there any restrictions? Can anybody become a used car dealer, or do you have to have been in the industry a while to even be able to do that?
Yeah. So, every state is different on becoming a used car dealer, right? So I'll preface this with this is not any advice whatsoever. But I do know that certain states have some more leeway, certain don't. You know, to be a used car dealer, it's like what does that even mean, right? Like to some people, a used car dealer is you have three cars on the lot, and you're selling cars and you're a used car dealer. And to others, it's a much bigger operation. And so there really are not many barriers to entry to be a used car dealer, but it's also not very lucrative if you don't do it at some scale where you're really when you're really taking advantage of high volume. And again, there's caveats to this, but again, that's my take on it. On the franchise side, it's a lot harder, right? Because franchisees are franchisees, and you can't have a Toyota store in every corner of every street of every town. You're going to have one or any OEM, you're going to have one in every certain cities or whatever it may be. And so most franchisees, you have to buy the franchise from someone else that wants to sell. Of course, we've had a crazy M&A market in the last couple of years. 2021 was a record year for franchise dealer consolidation. And so, the industry does continue consolidating, but it is tougher to become a franchise dealer. The OEMs will want to see some operating history. They want to see that, you had successful operating history, and, you have capital behind you in order to support their brand and operate a dealership. There are some programs where, if you've been in the industry in some form or fashion, there are some programs where the OEMs will actually give you an opportunity to open up a new franchise, but it's going to be in somewhere in the boondocks where you probably don't want to live or be. And so, if you really want to open a franchise store, and again, I don't know the exact mechanics of this work, but there are opportunities out there. You're just going to have to move to somewhere that you're probably not going to want to live. And so, that's sort of the layout today. We've explored it. I think that there's downsides that come with being a franchise dealer, where you really have to kind of fall within their box, the franchisor's box, and do things their way. And so it is very limiting, but it's also very lucrative. You own something that is in theory, it's limited supply, at least in your region, and so there's a lot of benefits of that.
Yep. I'm going to ask you just a really general question, and you can answer it in one sentence or however many you want. What separates like a great used car dealer from just a really average one? Assuming like same market, if you could almost say like it's the same dealership, but one group got to operate it one year and the other group operated the next, like what separates a car dealer at the end of the day? And that might be a super loaded question that we could spend an hour on, or you could wrap it up in one sentence. I don't know.
I think if I had to pinpoint to one thing, and my brain is going nuts right now because the first thing I'm thinking about is it what's best for the customer? Is it what's best for the business, or both?
Answer it
But I
both
think if I
ways.
had to, yeah. So I think best for the customer, I'm going to have to go with how does that dealer treat the customer 30 days after they bought their car, or 7 days after? Because I think that when they buy the car, it's a layup. Everyone's going to try to treat you as good as possible because they haven't gotten your money, right? Like, you tell me, Chris, if you bring a contractor and you pay them their money before they've done the work or they haven't completed it yet, I don't know, about you, but I know from my experience, it's tough to get that contractor to come back later on. And only the real reputable ones really follow up on their word, even if you paid them already and they come back and they complete that task. So I think in a similar way, and just how human nature is for most people, once people, the dealer made their money, if they're short sighted, then, after 30 days, they sort of forgot about you and they're not going to help you if you need them for whatever reason. And so I think you want to look for, and I think to parlay that to what separates the dealers from the customer, or from the good or the bad dealers, it's whoever thinks in a long-term mentality. I think the longer term you think in this industry, and I guess it's in every industry or many industries, but the longer term you think, just the better decisions you're going to make as a dealer. Whether it's how do I treat my customer, what type of product am I selling, um, you know, just what the reputation I'm building, how am I pricing my cars, how transparent am I? You know, and I think that's just the bottom line, right? The more transparent a dealer is, more likely than not, the better that dealership will be in the short and long term. And and ultimately, how do you treat a customer after the sale? Because to get the customer just to bite and to buy the car, we all do it every single day. But where are you 30 days later when the customer has an issue with the bank, or the customer needs to service their car, or they're in a pinch, or maybe they don't have a lot of money and they didn't buy a warranty and their tire popped. I mean, it's all these little things, Chris. I can't tell you how many times we've just spent discretionary, we've had these discretionary expenses for customers that we did not have to spend, but we did it not because we're saints, right? We're not saints. We are good people. We'd like to think we do want to help our customers, but because we know that it comes back to you. You help this person out today, they're going to refer you. They're going to refer their mother. They're going to refer their friends, even their enemies, for God's sake, right? So I think at the end of the day, like that's what it comes down to. Like, how are you thinking long term, and where are you in 30 days when that customer needs you?
I love it. All right. I want to spend a little bit of time, and we've kind of this has kind of been talked about throughout the episode, but everybody always says, car dealers don't make money on the sale of the car. They make it, we've talked about the warranty. We really haven't talked about repairs and maintenance yet. But I look at these car dealerships, especially the successful ones. They're big. They're on big pieces of land. The owners, have big houses in town. They're making money somehow. How do car dealers make money? Because when I hear, we don't make money on the sale of the car, and I'm like, that ain't true. Something's given. There's money somewhere. So we talked about the offshore account. Financing, I don't know. What are some ways that people make money? And then I also want to ask you, how important is real estate to the whole operation? And maybe it's different depending on what kind of dealer you are, but you got to tell me how you're making money here.
So car dealers are some of the biggest real estate people in the country. Like, some of them, it's you have so much real estate. It's a part of the business. Obviously, it appreciates over the decades. And so every car dealer I know owns their real estate, period. And again, not the corporate stores, although the corporate stores may do REITs and stuff like that, but they own that real estate because they know that how valuable it is in their communities and just the plot of the property itself. So let's just start there, right? Now, let's go beyond that, right? When you own that real estate, right, they pay themselves rent from the business. And so now you're going from being taxed on ordinary income, and I'm not a tax professional, but this is just, the common sense to me being in the business. You go from being taxed on ordinary business income to being taxed on, much more efficient, whatever the technical term is for the real estate income, capital gains or whatever. But the point is, you go from one form of taxation to a much more efficient form of taxation, and so you're saving money that way. And so you see these dealers that have extremely large monthly rental expenses to themselves because it just makes sense. Now you have to structure the store compensation accordingly, because you have management that gets paid on gross profit, on some percentage of net profit. And so they need to be incentivized at the end of the day. But, it's all, you weigh it accordingly.
Can I stop you right there real quick? I usually
Absolutely.
don't interrupt, but I got to stop you real quick. And maybe you'll get to this. But if they're only making $200, where is the money coming from to pay the rent? And I want you to tell me, in the margin of the car, when you say there is no money to be made, is that because $5,000 of the car that you just bought is going towards rent? And so that's technically, we're not calling it margin because it went to rent, but where does all this money come to pay these high rents?
Yeah. So look, the margin of a used car is anywhere between and when I say a used car, I'm talking about fully loaded, including the added products, right? You're looking at anywhere between 5 to 12, sometimes even a bit higher percent, right? So that's your gross margin. Depending on the operation, some operations may be closer to 5, but they sell them faster. Some may be closer to 10 or even 12. When, if you're in a subprime store, you're probably going to be higher margin there, right? So let's just start there. Now, from that, let's just take 10%. Let's just say that's your average margin on a card out the door, including the products and everything, right? For that 10%, you're roughly looking at a 50-50 split between the margin that you made on the car and the margin that you made on products. Again, this varies by store, but I'm giving you very, very generally speaking, right? And so, let's just say from that total value of the entire purchase, 5% was gross margin on the car, 5% was on product. But remember that if you break it down on a product basis, the 5% margin on that car was really 5% gross margin on the vehicle. But then on the products that you sell, remember the car is like a $20,000 car, maybe $30,000. The products you sell are $1,000, maybe $1,500, maybe $2,000. So the margin you make on those products is 40%, 50%, 60%. Right now, it's a weighted average because it's not, it's a much cheaper product in an aggregate. And I hope I'm not confusing you with this, but when it's all said and done, your ancillary products that you're selling are very high margin, and that's going to be roughly half of your total gross profit on a used vehicle. And the car itself is very low margin, and that will also be roughly a quarter to half of your total profit for most dealers. But that is just much, much lower margin. Now, the new car business is a bit different, right? Because historically, you went to buy a new car, you would ask for invoice price. That's where the industry had gotten to. And it was pretty ridiculous when you think about it that, you were buying this new car for practically, what it cost the dealer to buy it for. The dealer didn't make any margin. Sometimes they even lost, but they would make it up in big pools of capital in these kickbacks that they get from the OEMs, right? Nowadays, it's different because of the shortage, you're lucky if you're buying a car at MSRP, right? The suggested retail price by the OEM. And so if you're buying the car at MSRP, the dealer does have some margin there, which I'm not exactly sure the exact percentage is, but there's a little bit of margin in there for the dealer. Now, as you know, Chris, that in the last year, which has been very abnormal, there's been a ton of markups as well. So this is a heavily disputed point in the industry where a lot of dealers have been publicly against it. But dealers have been tacking on these market adjustment markups for, just because they can. And so that's obviously significantly increased new car margin. Before we move on, let me flip over to the service side of the business, right? Again, service side of the business is something that it's mostly the OEM, the franchise dealers focus on. Service side of the business is, if the margins vary, it can be from 20 to 30% on stuff like oil changes or whatever, all the way through 50, 60% as you or also, sorry, on the actual labor, 30%, or it can go all the way to 40, 50% when you start doing, more bigger jobs to cars with parts involved and whatnot. Now, the service side of the business historically is the most stable and consistent part of the business for the franchise dealers. And so there's a term called service absorption, which really just tracks as a dealer, how much of my total fixed cost am I covering with my profit from my service department? And typically, when you run a good, healthy service department, you're covering your fixed cost with all that margin. Your used car department or your new car department is almost seen as gravy, as extra. And so that's kind of the high level economic breakdown. And I can tell you that the variability between dealers is incredible. I mean, you have some franchise stores that are, losing money. And again, maybe not in 2021, but traditionally they do. Then you have some franchise stores that are making, and again, I'm talking about single point locations, right? Making $100,000 to, $400,000 in gross profit per month. And then you have some stores, Toyota stores or, Toyota stores are known to be very lucrative or whatnot. These stores could be making anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million to $1.5 million per month, and more. I mean, 2 million and up. So there's a lot of variability. Again, when it's all said and done, when you look at the bottom line, you're probably looking at 5 to 7% EBITDA. Again, that's kind of where the public multiple comps are. But that's more or less how it's broken down. And so again, it's not astronomical margins. And yes, The dealers pay themselves rent and whatnot, and in a very tax efficient form. But that's a rough construct of the dealer economy.
And when you were talking earlier about products, are we talking like rims? Are we talking about, what are products?
Yeah, so pretty much any added product that you're buying in addition to your car, right? So, dealers, there's this way that a lot of new car dealers, franchise dealers, sell you added products, and they show you, like, they'll physically show you like I don't know, a piece of the car, a part of the car, and it just feels very like intrinsic. It's like right there in front of you. It's like, if your catalytic converter breaks, here's what it looks like. You're going to pay this much. So this is why you should buy this coverage. And it really works from what I hear. We don't do it, but I hear it really works. But anyways, you can buy, dealers sell tons of added products, whether it's tire and wheel protection, an extended warranty, tinting, gap insurance, actual insurance, right? Car insurance. There's such a big, long list of products that you can buy, key fob replacement that you can buy when you're buying a car. And, pretty much almost every customer will buy something. But they're definitely, mostly high margin added products. And there's really a long list of them when you're buying a car.
Do 24-inch spinners add value to a car, or do you take value away from a car?
Oh my God. When people come to us with with the aftermarket stuff, unless you're trading in like a Supra or like an STI or something, please don't put aftermarket shit on your car. Please, for God. Like, it just doesn't help. It hurts the value. It kills your warranty. It's not a good thing.
You don't really see them anymore, but I've got to make a confession for all the audience here. I wanted spinners so bad when I was 16 years old. I can't even tell you how bad I wanted spinners.
Oh, man.
I've outgrown that.
All of us, Chris. We're all in the same boat.
We all wanted it.
And hydraulics. We all wanted it.
I did have two, I think it was like 20-inch Rockford Fosgate subwoofers in the back of my Jeep Cherokee that I would just blast.
Yeah, they still work with some of the, I forget which OEMs. They come with some new cars. I forget which ones. You might know, but yeah, they're still around.
All right, we're gonna bring it home with just like some direct Twitter questions. You've been very generous with your time, but I got probably 15 more minutes of some cool questions. One guy said, would love to know how inventory supply negotiations go. I see city dealers with mostly full lots, rural dealers with empty lots. Are city dealers just willing to pay more, or do manufacturers have population-based allocations?
And again, was this new car or used car?
Well, maybe it was a new car question. You want to pass on that one?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have much to share there. What I can say is that different OEMs have different supply right now. And so certain OEMs have more cars, certain have less. And so it really does depend on the franchise right now and what the dealer places for ordering. But I can tell you that there's certain stores like Toyota stores and whatnot that have months long of deposits.
Okay.
And so, it really depends on the OEM and the region and country you're in.
Car dealership guy, I got a great offer from CarMax to buy my leased car, which is expiring soon. Should I wait to buy the car out from the dealer and then sell, or just sell it now? Any difference between the two?
I get asked this like every day, and my answer is, I'm just not I can't predict the future. I can only tell you what I think will happen. And what I think will happen is that we're entering a normal depreciation cycle. I don't think we're going to see any rapid deflation. So the answer to your question there would sort of be, does it really matter? You're not going to be making, extra money right now or saving a potential loss either way. And so I think, do what is good for your family. Unless you have 3 cars, don't just go dump your car to make 10 grand and then pay up for a new car, because that just won't make sense.
Okay. This is a hot topic right now, so I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh no.
Do people is there a growing demand for electric vehicles right now? Like, are people coming to you saying, I want an electric vehicle? Is it a function of price? Like, do people really give a shit? Like, Generally speaking, how big of a dent is it putting in the auto industry?
I mean, you're the anti-fossil fuel guy, no? I thought that was you. I'm just kidding. You're like, no, 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 no,
I'm
no.
not anti-electric vehicle either. I'm pro
I
both.
know. Absolutely. And by the way, I am too. And I think that the future will be both. I don't see a future that will be, just like look at e-commerce today. Again, just random example, but you have retail e-com, both are thriving. So I can tell you that I have never seen demand for EVs like I see today. I think that there's many reasons for it. I think, of course, recent gas prices is helping. I think Tesla has grown, and just all these new EV companies have debuted in the markets. Rivian, I mean, you're getting more options. Price remains a big issue for a lot of people, and just entry price points are still high, relatively speaking. But the market for EVs right now is absurd. You cannot touch Teslas. I think I tweeted the other day about a Tesla, like a used Tesla that's going for like maybe like $10,000 more than new. I think it was a Model 3. But when I checked Tesla.com, the Model 3 was maybe 2 months out, right? So like only 60 days. We're not talking about like 6 months. And so the point is that Teslas specifically are in insane demand right now. Um, all EVs are, but Tesla is definitely like disproportionate. And I think it's going to be a secular trend. I don't think it's going away. I just think that the pace is increasing. Higher gas prices are helping, and I definitely think that EVs are going to be a bigger part of our lives moving forward, and that you're going to see a lot of innovation there. I'm speaking with several people about different opportunities in the EV space, not at all from like a manufacturing or production perspective, but what do people want? What does the market need as it starts to adopt more EVs? Some very interesting opportunities in the market. And so, expect to see a lot of innovation in the coming years in that space.
I love it. Most of these service centers that these traditional used car dealers have, can they service a gas powered vehicle just like they can an EV vehicle, or is that creating a little bit of friction in the industry?
It's definitely creating friction. Some of the smarter and more proactive dealers are starting to upgrade their facilities accordingly. EVs do require less maintenance to some extent, right? They don't need oil and stuff like that. So it does definitely hit the dealers just overall sales and margins as EVs will be adopted more. You're going to probably need some more specialized training for techs on around electronics and whatnot. So it's gonna change the landscape. I mean, we're foolish to think it won't. But look, that's at the end of the day, that's innovation, right? You're either going to be a smart dealer that's going to be ahead of it and welcome it and lead it from the front, or you're going to gripe about it and ultimately lose out a lot of your service business. Yep. So I think that's kind of where the industry stands. And the second thing I'll mention is that very, very interesting to see what Ford is doing with their how they're splitting up their EV division and their internal combustion division. I think it's alluding to something bigger in the industry, which we're probably going to see over time, and that's more OEMs going direct to consumer. I'm not saying that's going to happen without a fight from the franchisees, but I think that we're just in different. The world has progressed. When you look at it objectively, it makes total sense. I don't think that dealers selling new cars. I mean, there's no value to that anymore, or very minimal. Yes, it's a fulfillment center. That's great, but I think that's the value that it brings nowadays, and they should be paid for that. But there should be some fee or something alongside it. But look at the Tesla online car buying experience. I mean, I have not bought a Tesla. I'm a dealer, and I haven't bought a retail car like that, but I have checked out the experience, and I think it makes total sense for a new car. And even for a used car with, what you're seeing on, Carvana, CarMax, and all the other online players or hybrid players. Although I do think with used car, the market is gravitating towards a more omni-channel experience where people still want to see the car in person, or at least have the options to buy online and see it in store. So that's sort of like a lay of the land right now, what we're seeing in the industry. But definitely new cars and EVs specifically is going to continue making a big dent in this industry.
Can you sell a used Tesla, or does Tesla have to buy back the Tesla and sell it used, or any dealer can sell a used Tesla?
Yeah, any dealer can sell a used Tesla. Just good luck getting your hands on them.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. And so getting your hands on it is the hard part. But I mean, we've sold Tesla, plenty of them. So, they fly off the shelves. People love them.
In your opinion, are they flying off the shelves because there's a superior car, or because Elon Musk is a cult and we all follow Elon Musk?
And Elon we trust. Elon is such a great marketer. I mean, all the earned media, you mentioned it earlier in the pod, but all the earned media, and you see what he said today with Twitter. He's just a great marketer. I think everything is culminating. I just don't think it's one thing. I mean, I do think it's a great car. It's not the perfect car. No car is, but it's a great car. He's a great marketer. They were, the OG of EVs in a way. Maybe not exactly, but they were one of the earliest. And so, I think all that coming together, it's and plus you have options, right? They have a 10-year head start or 5-year head start on many of these OEMs, and you have options. They don't have maybe SUV options like you do with Rivian. But I think that's why, competition is good. Expect to see a lot more innovation in that space.
On the topic of innovation, is there anything like, I don't know how to ask this question. We talked earlier, like you were saying that rental companies are starting to buy used cars like they never have before. There's been promise of the autonomous vehicle or autonomous driving vehicle. Uber's kind of their like value prop for the average driver now is not that great. They're taking over taxis in New York. Is there anything in the innovation space for the average consumer that's like super interesting right now, or is it just going to be pretty expensive for a while because there's a shortage of cars? Anything that like you lay awake in bed going, this is awesome?
I think I'm a very curious person, and I'm naturally involved. I'm very involved in just the mobility community and the innovation space. So let me tell you a few things I'm seeing that are very interesting. Let's start high level with what's publicly known, right? You see that companies like Carvana that just bought Odessa, which is a massive national auction house. They're buying them for their land. It gives them more opportunity to scale their internal operations, maybe even introduce an omnichannel experience. Who knows? I think any dealer that has been operating and has, knows is even remotely in tune with their customer and knows that people in our industry want that omnichannel experience, which just means that they can buy their car online or in store or all of the above. And so I think that, that's number one that's where our industry is headed, right? The second thing I'm seeing is you're seeing companies that are trying to, the lines are being blurred all across the board, right? So you have companies like TrueCar that are now offering like a digital buying experience. Car Gurus has made some moves offering a digital sales experience. You have a company in Canada called Vin, which is sort of doing like a concierge experience where it's not just a third-party listing site, but they really help you buy the car. You have a company called Geta, which is actually buying traditional dealers and transforming them into a modern experience where the customer can buy their car online or buy it in store. Fascinating model. But you have a lot of different types of models in the market right now that are sort of striving in a similar direction, which is the right direction, and that's offering the consumer a more thorough experience, meaning you do more for the customer. You're not just showing them the cars. You're not just a listing site. You're not just a retailer. Rather, you own a bigger chunk of the experience, a bigger chunk of the GMV, the gross merchandise value, by providing more value. And you do that by offering financing, concierge, an online car buying experience, or all of the above, right? And so I think that's what we're seeing is that, the lines are just getting blurred. The experience is being modernized. It's being innovated. And I think we're going to be in a much better car buying world in 10 years. I think that as a customer, your options are going to be much better. You will not only have to go shop at Carvana or CarMax or whoever to buy your car 100% online, right? That's still a very small part of the market. Call it less than 3% or so that only wants to buy their car online. And so the more options you're going to give your customers, the more value you'll provide, which over time, all of these players will continue vertically integrating. You're going to see these lines continue to get blurred, but ultimately the customer experience will just get better, 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 better.
All right, my man. This was just gold. If only more people could actually know who you were. I know we're friends, but this is awesome, man.
Well, I'm sure some will guess and will DM me, and I'm sure some will know. But as long as most don't, we can keep doing our thing. I'll keep providing value, and I love this. I really enjoyed the conversation. I know I spoke like 99% of the time, but we'll consider this a conversation.
That's the
and
goal. Nobody is here to hear
yeah,
me.
all right. Well, I love it. And Chris, thanks for everything. This was really great, and that's all I got for you.
Thanks, brother.